guys, welcome back to the Apostolic Bird Podcast. This is episode 2, and today's topic is the Montgomery Riverfront Brawl. So at this point, it has been a little over a month and a half since the incident took place. It took place on August 5th on a riverfront in Montgomery, Alabama, which is a city that is known for its racial history, for the civil rights movement. You have Rosa Parks, you have some Martin Luther King marches, etc., that have happened in that place, in that city historically. So there's a lot of racial tension that has come out from this incident, specifically because there were two sides. In the end, there were two sides. There was the whites, and then there were the blacks in this specific incident. I am one of those people, whether you like it or not. I do not see color. However you feel about that term, I don't see it. And what I mean by that is I obviously see that you are white, black, Asian, Indian, whatever you are, but I don't treat you differently based on that. I actually am an advocate, even in my workplace, for bringing in international individuals, professionals, regardless of accents, etc. Because I've worked with people from literally many countries, whether that be they came from Mexico, they came from China, they've come from India. I've been to India myself. I grew up in an interracial family. All of that to say, when I say I truly don't treat anybody differently, I treat everybody equally, and I think that's what we should be doing as a country. Let's put that aside. It was a little quick for me to jump into my opinions because I want you guys to just hear the facts of the story. But the story is there was individuals owning the pontoon boat that was docked in a place that a tour cruise was supposed to dock, and no matter how many times they called for the pontoon boat to move, the pontoon boat didn't. And then when they decided that, hey, we've been out on the water for about 45 minutes, then we need to take action into our own hand. I think they even said over the intercom that they were going to call the police to come move as well. And I believe it was only a couple feet that they needed the pontoon boat to move forward so that they could dock properly and get their many guests off of their tour boat. And then I'm not sure if they had another one, but in essence, so they can continue operations. So what ended up happening, long story short, is the owners of the pontoon boat saw that they were coming to move their boat, started running down. There was an altercation. The owners of the pontoon boat were white, and the person they were having the altercation with was black. He was the co-captain, I believe, of the Harriet II, which is the cruise ship, the little tour cruise ship. And so I'm only mentioning race because it's relevant to this story. But so they end up getting into you can see on the videos, they were obviously in an argument. You can hear that racial slurs were given. And I'm not sure what actually led to the first punch, but one of the pontoon individuals punched this gentleman. And then a whole fight ensued between all the parties of the pontoon boat, this gentleman, and then people from the actual boat themselves. There you can see videos of people actually jumping in the water, swimming to the dock to go help him. And then you can see people running down to aid him. And at this point, that's where I say there's a clear division of the whites and the blacks. So back to what I was saying about my opinion is I believe racism exists today. However, I do believe that there's a much larger issues with whether you want to call it reverse racism, whatever you want to call it, where instead of us coming together and everybody, like I get the amount of hate I expect to get from even saying that I don't see color is unbelievable. Like, why do we see color? Why shouldn't we treat everybody equally? Why shouldn't we treat everybody equally? So I see that in today's world. I see even black on black racism if they don't act the same, if they don't adhere to the black culture. Some people may know Candace Owens. I'd actually just watched a video today where she was talking about that, how she's even being made fun of in one of Gabrielle Union's movies because she talks differently. What I thought would be an interesting take on racism is talking to my sister. As I mentioned earlier, I did grow up as a part of an interracial family from the age of 12 on. My mom married my stepdad, who is Black, so I gained Black step siblings. I'm gonna say more importantly, but important for this story, this discussion, was my sister Amber. She's about 5 years older than me, and when my mom married my stepdad, it was literally just her and I. So other siblings are still in Alabama and Mississippi, and then her younger siblings lived with her mom in Mississippi as well. And so it was just her and I. You had a 12-year-old who is not new to Louisiana, from Alabama. I was born in South Alabama, and then we moved to South Louisiana. And she was born in Mississippi and had lived in South Louisiana for a while. But going from an only child, basically, to a child who was the youngest of multiple was a fun dynamic that we laugh about and we talk about all the time. But growing up as interracial kids, and I decided, I was like, hey, Amber, can I just talk to you about, I have my experiences of growing up in an interracial household, but I have been told my opinions are not valid. So I want to talk to you as the Black sibling in this family. What was your experience like growing up in the South? So I am from the South. I know racism exists. I know that there's a lot of prejudice still in the South that has been carried down through generations. I don't agree with it. As I said earlier, I believe everybody should be treated equally regardless of your race. But I wanted to see Amber's opinions on her life growing up as a Black individual in the South, and then her being a sibling, an older sibling, especially as well, of me, obviously. My girl. So let's get into it. I hope you guys enjoy this. I found a lot of interesting things. Also, I had never had this conversation with my sister before, so there was a lot of cool insights that I got out of this as well. So let's go.
Just a little bit of background on kind of the topic. Today's topic is racism is the topic, and what happened is the Montgomery Riverfront Brawl was earlier in August, so just a couple weeks ago. And do you know anything about that?
I've seen, as sad as it is to say, I've seen things on social media, most of them the people being ridiculous about it, but I guess I get the gist of it.
Yeah, so pretty much that's what it was. I had a friend send me a video the day it happened and was like, hey, did you know this happened? Because she knows, like, I was born in Alabama, I have family there. And so she was just sharing with me, and she knows I'm in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've watched videos. I have, race is a big issue in our country. I think everybody knows that. And I think, everybody has their opinions. Some people are very extreme with it, as like you said, what you saw. And then some people have different viewpoints. And so when I saw this, it's not necessarily that I wanted to talk about the brawl itself. I do give a little bit of background about the brawl, like in this podcast, just to say, like, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. Before I go into like what I wanted to talk about with you and I, because I am a white person. So it's almost like, for me personally, feels like reverse racism of like, it's not okay that I'm white. It's like, if I'm white, my opinions aren't valid. And I literally was told just the other day that because I'm white, like, no one would ever do anything racist towards me or do anything mean. I forget how exactly they said it. But basically that's kind of the vibe it came off of, like, of course you're white, like nothing's ever going to happen to you, kind of thing. And
I have to disagree with that. It may not be to the same degree or the same way that would be to me as a Black person, but I'm not saying that you wouldn't experience some kind of racism somewhere or another. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. I know other countries, I've heard about like certain Asian countries, that like the whiter you are, the like they value it, like they try to be as white or as pale as they can be. And so if people who are white go to those countries and they get like favorable treatment. So I don't know. I've never experienced that. But
you did, to a degree. Remember when you went to India and they wanted to take pictures with you because you had the blonde hair and all that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't exactly favorable treatment, but you were treated as almost like an oddity or a something to see and to think about and to talk about, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Like people were taking pictures of me. Like, I think I was taking a picture in front of the Mysore Palace, and like there's people taking pictures of me getting my picture taken. And then I think two different families approached me to like take pictures with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting, but I wasn't the only white person there. Like there was other white people. So I don't know. I don't know if it was because I was with a group of Indians. And other people were like more obvious tourists. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But we were outside of the main city as well. We were in like where the Mysore Palace is like 2 hours outside of Bangalore. So that's, even more remote. And it reminds me of Matt, where like, remember the first time he came to Lafayette and we went to like I don't know if you remember this, but I remember this. We went to the Chinese restaurant and there was a lot of Mexicans,
Mm-hmm.
and Matt out loud was like, "There's a lot of Mexicans here." We're like, "Matt," and he was young, so and it's just
young people have no filter, so it is what it is.
exactly. So with him not being around it, it was like, "Oh, this is a new," because I'm not around. Like for him, it's white or black. Like in Mississippi, white or black versus like you start going closer to Texas, you get more Mexicans or Hispanics. And where I'm at, I've got a big blend of like Asians and Hispanics and white and black, etc. And other, those are the main, but you've got more, obviously. Yeah. So anyway, so kind of going with that, it might have been like that culture shock of like, oh wow, like we're so far removed from like the big city that we're not used to seeing foreigners. Okay, so like also you and I, we have an interesting history out of all of our siblings. So our family is very interracial. It's very split. So I'm white and I have older siblings who are white. I think I have four. Amanda, Taz, Chris, JT. Okay, I have four that are white. They live in Mississippi and Alabama. And then on your side, I have you, Kelly, Matt, and Tiana. So it's like, the youngers are black, the elders are white. You and I are kind of in the middle. But our history, since this, for the podcast, so our listeners can hear, is that I was 12. I think actually our parents started dating. Our parents knew each other. Let's go back even further. Our parents knew each other when they were like, 17 and something in the 20s. My mom knew your mom. My mom knew you when you were born and when you were a toddler. So same thing with Amanda. Amanda's only a couple years older than you. And so I think they said that like you and Amanda played together as kids. So, like that's how long they knew each other.
Right.
Then years passed, both of them divorced years later, and then they reconnect. And so at this point, I'm 10, I'm 9. I remember this. And then you're 5 years older than me, so that makes you 14. Okay. Wow, I never thought about your age in this. But anyway, so you're 14. And so our parents reconnect, they start dating, and then when I was 12 is when they got married and we moved to Lafayette.
Yes,
because that's when I started 7th grade. So yeah. So then you, a 16-year-old, going on 17, inherited a crazy wild 12-year-old. And I went from being like the youngest of multiple kids and like it being a crazy house to the youngest of like me and you, and you're used to being alone, by yourself. You liked reading. And then not only that, they stuck us in a house. They bought a new house in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors. They're like, bam, be sisters, get along. So we have that perspective of going through, the household was made up of Mr. Kenneth, mom, myself, and you and myself. Yeah. And so I have my perspective of what it was like growing up in an interracial household, which I had absolutely no problems with.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember people making funny comments, like, I think it was seventh grade, and like, because you and I would walk out to the bus together, and like your bus, I think, would either pick you up right before mine, but my bus riders would see me or see us. And I remember one day one girl turned around and goes, "Are you mixed?"
Oh yeah, that's always the question. Is it you or me that's mixed? Or both of us? It's like, no.
And I think it's only because one parent at a time would like walk us out to the bus.
Right.
So yeah. But so it's just funny things like that. I know Shayla is an inherently or a more popular name of a Black girl versus a white girl. So I've got that. But you and I started talking yesterday, and I thought that this would be awesome for the podcast. But I guess we kind of you started talking about your childhood and how it started. So you were born in Mississippi, and you had a white best friend. And feel free to
more when I got to New Orleans. I was only in Mississippi for 2 years in Jackson. Then we moved to New Orleans from there.
But I know you said that you weren't aware, obviously, if you were only in Mississippi for 2 years, you were too young to be aware.
I wasn't aware of anything. Like, I just was a person. That was it. It was when I got to New Orleans, that was between the ages of 2 to 7, where I began to make friends and be aware of people. But even then, I was not aware of races. It was just a matter of, these are people at school, these are people at home, these are people that we go visit, back home in Mississippi. They were just people. But I mean, I was only 2 to 7, so how am I supposed to know any different? I didn't see a difference. We were just people,
Right. So then you said you went back to Jackson, and it was a more predominantly Black school. And they actually, the Black students there actually started looking at you weird because you were different.
Right. So not Jackson, we went to small town Columbia, Mississippi. So yeah, Jackson's big city, Columbia's small town, like very, very small town, like the hopping place to be is Walmart, small town kind of thing. So when I went from the big city of New Orleans down to small town Columbia, and then going to a predominantly Black school, that was a culture shock for me. Like I said, I was used to being in a predominantly white area, where the schools I went to, they had a decent mixture, but it was mostly, Caucasian people that were in the school. And it never bothered me, because that's just what I did. I took dance classes with with all kind of people, and it never occurred to me there's a difference in our races. But when I got to Mississippi and I got to Columbia, I was there, and I went to a predominantly Black school, and they looked at me like I was crazy because I didn't talk like they did. Now, granted, some of that is I'm coming from Louisiana, so my accent is different, and they're in small town, Mississippi, so their accent is different. So the accent was its own thing, had nothing to do with race, but I think that's where people took it from. It's like, you talk like you're stuck up, or you talk like you're preppy. I'm like, no, I'm just talking like I've been taught to talk. That's just these words that you say. My mom and I used to read all the time over the summertime, and my dad's mother was insistent that I learn how to speak correctly and not, sound like I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. So even as a kid, I was taught to speak a certain way. Not to say I'm better than you, or you're not as good as me, or I'm smarter than you are. That's just the way we talked at home. I never saw a difference in it. And they were the students there were the ones to look at me crazy and say, well, why do you talk so funny? Or why don't you do the same things that we do? Or why don't you know some of the music that we know? It's like, I just don't, I'm meeting you for the first time. I'm seeing how it is to, be around all these different people. My hair's not quite the same way. My attitude is not quite the same. My mom was a teacher in the school. So I don't want to say I was a tattletale, but I was like, I'm not doing anything to get in trouble. If you do something to get in trouble, I'm not getting in trouble for you, So it was different for me to be that completely different entity that they weren't used to amongst all the rest of them. And I was more than willing to, be friends and join in and understand and do all the things that were going on, but I didn't understand it. Like, there's just so many pieces and parts where that background of that culture I did not have. I just didn't know.
Yeah. So I was going to say that knowing both of your parents, it makes sense that you mentioned like Mr. Kenneth's parents making it like adamant that they spoke properly and that you spoke properly, because I've never known them to speak any other way. And they grew up in, your mom's not from Columbia, is she?
No, they both grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, where I was born.
Right. So yeah, growing up in Jackson, they don't talk. They talk proper, like they, So I just that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And then, like we said, moving back to a bigger city, to Lafayette, Louisiana. Once again, I went back to predominantly white school, and that was another time where people looked at you funny because it's like, you're coming from Mississippi, small town Mississippi. You're supposed to be, country or hickish, or you're supposed to have a country accent, or you're not supposed to be smart. And I think that threw them for a loop. That once again, I don't have an accent. This is just the way that I talk. I'm not trying to be better than anyone else. That's just my speech pattern. It's what it is. This is just what I've learned. And for them, it threw them off a little bit to see, a Black person coming from Mississippi that, once again, does not meet their expectations of what a Black person should be. Now, that was one person who said one thing, and I don't know why it kind of stuck in my brain. I just thought it was because the accent is the thing that always gets people about me. They're like, where are you from? It's like, I'm from the South. It's where I've lived my whole life. It's not my fault I don't sound like it, But even then, there was not too much treatment to be odd, but I was in a more affluent school, I guess you could say. So even the, African-American students that were there with me, we're all about the same, Granted, where some of us lived in trailer parks, some of us lived in apartment buildings, some of us lived in houses, but our school was in the middle of the expensive older neighborhood. So it's like there was kind of an expectation about who was going to that school at the same time. Not a private school, still a public school, but you were expected to have a little bit more sense, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know we also talked about sometimes people have said some ugly things to you that you called them like just ridiculous and stupid. You did talk about the fact that like being proud, or people being proud of you because you're successful Black woman. You want to talk about that?
So there have been some small instances of people that have been ugly or racist towards me, and most times it just rolls off my back because I'm like, I can't believe that actually happened. Like, this is the time period we live in, and nobody has really came at me crazy about something. So it takes me more by surprise than making me angry when something like that happens. And I'm like, well, that was dumb and stupid. Okay, moving on, just go about the rest of my day. It's not a big deal. But the one that still gets me is seeing, people in the hospital, and they find out that, you're not only a nurse, but went back to school to teach, and that I'm responsible for these students, and, I have these, credentials behind my name. They're like, I'm so proud of you. You did such an amazing thing to, reach this level that you're at. And at first I'm like, is it because of my age, or is it because of my skin tone? And most of the people who say it to me are the same skin tone as me. So it may be an age thing, it may be a skin tone thing, but a lot of times they're just so proud that I've done something with my life, and I think to myself, I'm glad you're proud of me, and I appreciate that you expressed that to me, but I think it should be more common that you see that, and that's not a surprise for you to see the nursing instructor that walks into the room is a Black woman, So I appreciate the support from them, but I wish that it was not such a unicorn thing to see. I wish there was more commonplace for people to understand, oh, that's the person who's going to do those things,
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think there's not more people, I don't want to say Black people, not even necessarily nursing instructors, but succeeding in that way?
Some of it, honestly, I've talked about it before with other people. I think some of it is you're not expected to reach very far. To a point, depending on where you are. There's some areas where, you're expected to do this and do that because your family did it. But when you think about the stereotype of, Black people, it's a matter of, hey, you graduated high school, good job, you did what you needed to do. No, I expect more from you from that, because you can, I expect you to be able to go to college. Is college the end all be all? No, it's not. Don't go to college. Go, do trade school, do some other thing. But I expect you to be successful, because that's what an adult does. An adult gets out of school, they begin to take care of themselves, and they create a career of some sort to take care of their own selves instead of having their family take care of them. And I think some of the stereotype of Black people that Caucasian people think and that Black people think is that the government has taken care of me my whole life as a child. I've never seen some of my parents do any work. They always, lived on this, lived on that, lived on that. So why should I do any different? you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the cherry on top that I reached and I was successful. It should be expected that you be a successful person who is a, you know, good member of society that's contributing to society. Like that seems to me the bare minimum of what a person should do if you're able to.
Right. That actually reminds me of my childhood. So I remember growing up and like getting AB honor roll was like, oh, you got AB honor roll, like great, you know, that's great for you. But it wasn't until that first I laugh at this because I should have been smarter, but I was only 12. But you know, Mr. Kenneth required a lot from you. He required, and maybe your mom too, but just my perspective, I only, you know, knew of the Mr. Kenneth side. He required a lot from you. And so like you had to make A's, you had to make all A's, like that requirement. And so I remember coming in, I was never expected to make all A's. I was just expected to make it. It was rewarded if I made AB honor roll, or you get those little rewards. I read so many books in school or whatever. As long as you know, if I got a C, that was pretty bad, but like A's and B's, that was my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And then at you got all A's, and I was like, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do what Amber does, because that's my sister. And, and I did it. And which parent told me this? It wasn't my mom. It wasn't my dad. It was Mr. Kenneth, who said, now that I know you can do, like, he actually said, now you've screwed up, because now that I know you can do it, I expect it from you.
Exactly.
I was like, ugh.
And then that's the truth. And I think, like I've mentioned before, when I talked to you before, I've always used to think to myself, maybe I'm not a great role model for other Black students because I don't have the same background they did. I didn't go through some of the trials that they did to reach the level that they are. But I've had a student, like I told you, who told me, is like, I came here, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me, but then I saw you and you treated me like every other student, Black or white. And you expected the same from me. And I was like, of course I expect the same from you. You both met the requirements to get in. Doesn't matter what your skin color is. You met the requirements. You both have the same work to do. You do it and you do it well. That's what I expect from you, regardless of what you look like. You know, regardless of your gender, regardless of whatever your religion may be, regardless of, you know, your skin tone. You applied to do this. So I expect that work from you. And that's just all there is to it.
Right. And you're not, I don't want to call you, you're not an easy teacher, if you will. Like, you are a very fair teacher, but you expect a lot from your students.
Right. I mean, the students that I work with are in the very beginning, so they need a little bit of hand holding, and I'm willing to hold your hand and work your way through, but I won't do the work for you. You have to do it on your own. You come to me when you need help, and you come to me when you need support and that cheerleader. But if you're not willing to do anything, then I can't help you. I can't do this career path for you. That's on you to get it done.
Right. Right. And so you kind of said something about, in general, I guess like what we're talking about is that like mentality of people, the expectations different. And I've often wondered because in reality, the civil rights movement and everything happened less than 100 years ago. So I do get that there are people, whether it be grandparents or whatnot, that have experienced that true segregation and that true racism in America. They can still be alive, basically. And I think Mr. Kenneth even kind of went maybe through a time period of dealing with, okay. And he's only in his 60s. So, not that long ago. Is he 60?
Yeah, he's 63.
Okay. Sorry, I was not mathing. So he's only in his 60s, and, you know, he's experienced some of that. So, I mean, that actually makes me think, but let me finish my thought here. So I wondered if it was parents who felt a certain way, taught it to their kids, that mentality, and then taught it to their kids. So at this point, we're at people who maybe have experienced some racism. And I don't want to say there's no racism in America, because there is. There, depending on where you're at, depending on who you encounter, some people are just straight up idiots, idiotic, prejudice, etc. And they experience that true racism still today. But that mentality is still being passed down of don't trust the white man or whatever, that kind of everybody's out to get me mentality. And that's what I've personally seen or believed or perceived as happening would you agree, or?
Yeah. And I think once again, it goes back to, like you were saying, it's how your parents raised you. You know, I talk about this in my class. Implicit bias is a huge thing, and implicit bias is your unconscious beliefs and thoughts about certain things. And it's not something that you overtly do. It's just in the back of your mind, and it comes from where you were born, how you were raised, all these different things. So when I say my perspective of racism is a certain thing, it's all based on my implicit bias, all the different ways that I have experienced life, whether it's my own life or my family's life. And so to think about it, my dad's father was a math teacher in, Mississippi back in the 40s, 50s. Okay. So here is a man who went to school, who went to college to teach. His wife was also a teacher. So they were there to teach, to be professional, to work, to, get retirement, to do something every day with themselves. That's going to be a contribution to society. All right. So then they instill that into my dad. You will work, you will do well, and you will be a contribution to society. So he did. He worked well. He graduated high school early. He did it, because he could. And then my mother, who's her own mother was, she wasn't a teacher. She was a CNA. She worked in the hospital, but her thing was, my kid's going to have to do something, So they weren't quite to the level as my dad, but my mom eventually made her way through college because she wanted to have a job where she could take care of herself and her children should she need to, because she saw how difficult it was for her mother, who had to work several jobs to do that. Right. Mm-hmm. So I have a mother who's like, I'm going to get this college education so I can take care of myself and take care of my kids. I have a father who graduated high school early, granted didn't go to college, but found a career in a trade that works for him. Both of them told me, you have to do well in school. You have to get good grades. You need to be able to go. They didn't say I had to go to college. It was just kind of understood. But my dad's whole thing was, I don't want you to have to work outside the heat or work in unfavorable conditions if you don't have to. So I expect you to do well with your schooling. So between the two of them, I did well with my schooling because it's what is expected of me.
Hey guys, I hope you've been enjoying the interview thus far. However, due to the length, I've decided to make this into 2 episodes. So tune in for the next episode, episode 3, where we'll finish the interview with my sister Amber. If you are interested in content like this, or you want to be notified for episode 3, subscribe, like, save, follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok, and follow me on Facebook. All right, see you guys next time.